Are humans becoming obsolete? We've built computers to do our thinking, our calculating, many of our daily chores, and even advanced tasks. Will they soon replace our human friendships too? AI companions are becoming less science fiction and more non-fiction. Will they become the norm? And are they putting young people at risk? That debate coming up on CounterPoints with me, Melinda Nusafora. I want you to meet Abby. She works at an aged care facility in Melbourne, Australia.
So she's been designed and built to address and alleviate loneliness. So people just talk to her as a one-on-one friend and companion. So people talk to her about, stories from their life, their love affairs, their family stories. They don't see her as a robot. They see her as a friend.
That sounds really heartwarming, right? But would you feel the same if Abby looked more human and was the main source of friendship for, say, a regular school kid? A recent study found 70% of US teens have used or regularly use an AI companion. And of them, 31% said talking to their robotic friend was just as or more satisfying than talking to a real one. So are humans out and humanoids in? Because this technology and its applications are still relatively new, not much research has been done into the long-term impacts on a young person's development. So on this episode, we'll debate if AI companions are set to replace real human friends and partners. Could that pose a danger to teenagers? And are human beings going to become obsolete? Joining the show to discuss the degree to which AI will and is, in some regards, replacing humans in our daily social and professional lives is Dr. Rumaan Chowdhury, CEO and founder of Humane Intelligence and the former US science envoy for AI. Andrew Kegel is with us, CEO of Robotics, a company which builds AI-powered robots for companionship, entertainment and customer service. And rounding out our expert and very high-tech panel is Dr. Lydia Kostopoulos, founder of AI Compassion Coach and author of Imagination Dilemma. Everyone, welcome to CounterPoints. This is going to be a really interesting discussion. When ChatGPT first hit the internet, people were worried about kids cheating on their homework or plagiarising essays. Now, the applications and maybe the worries go far beyond that. AI is playing a greater role in young people's lives, more so than just in their schoolwork. It's now informing and sometimes replacing their real-life relationships. But is it a good thing? Rumaan, let's start with you. Will AI companions one day replace real human friends or partners?
In short, no. I think that at a meta level represents a pretty big existential crisis for humanity if we are no longer interacting with each other. Artificial intelligence, it is programming. There is nothing real, alive, sentient, loving, feeling, or caring about it. So when people develop relationships with AI systems, it's what's called a parasocial relationship. It is not actually reciprocated. It is the mimicry of reciprocation. And also because these are built by commercial entities trying to get you to buy and use their product, they suffer from something called sycophancy, which means that it is telling you what you want to hear, making you feel good, and this creates artificial expectations that then create people unable to operate in the real world. Because in the real world, you have to compromise, you have to interact, and you have to deal with situations that might be uncomfortable or difficult for you.
Andrew, what do you think? Because your robots are so human-like. Do you think that human relationships in certain circumstances can be replaced?
Right. I think they're already being replaced. And so, I would take a counter point to what was just said to say it's not the future. I think it's the now. And the way we view things is that we're sort of filling a void. We're not necessarily replacing what I would call more mainstream human relationships, but we're filling a void with people who may be, for example, geographically isolated, people with PTSD or social trauma. We've recently sold a robot to a family that has a 30-year-old autistic son who has difficulty communicating with humans in a traditional form, but really enjoys communicating with AI. And so for a lot of people who maybe, again, don't have access to traditional relationships, they don't live in a big city, I do believe we're filling a void, and that the AI can take on more human characteristics where it's not just there to be a pleaser, but can actually provide lifelike type interactions.
Lydia, what's your take? Two kind of, not polar opposite, but two sort of competing views there.
Well, perhaps the truth is somewhere in the middle. I think that it's important to mention that these technologies are coming at a moment in time where we are already experiencing social isolation. And many like to think that this is a new phenomenon. But actually, political scientist Robert Putnam made the famous bowling alone thesis, where he explained that social activity has been in decline since the 1950s in the US. So we do have a fragmentation of society. I'm not saying that AI companions or robots will fix that or should fix that. But I think it's important that this context is present as we discuss this. I personally think that AI bots, companions, coaches have a role to play, and that it is different than what a human does in many ways.
We're going to come to maybe the differences, maybe the dangers in our next segment, but I guess I want to keep focused on how far-reaching this is. I mean, Roman, what do you think when you hear Andrew saying it's not in the future, it's the here and now? Is it happening to a greater extent than perhaps we're accepting?
I think parasocial relationships with chatbots absolutely is happening to a greater extent than people are aware of. And I'm so glad, by the way, that you brought up Robert Putnam. I'm a political scientist. My PhD was on the concept of social capital. So that's the term that was coined, right? The idea of the social fabric between people being eroded over time. And as somebody who has worked at a social media company, Twitter, right? Like, social media and this technology is accelerating the social isolationism. Now, this is not to say these things are all bad. Like, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I do think we have to be very mindful about in what context and how people are interacting with this technology. You know, I've recently started a TikTok, and it's very fascinating. I had an entire post about parasocial relationships with AI systems, and I would say about 70% of the comments were people saying, well, what's the problem? I like my chatbot. My chatbot has a name. And I do think there's a problem here because, again, you know, I don't think any company trying to sell you a product is going to have this product do things like challenge your perspectives, you know, make you broaden your mind. And again, you're 100% correct. This did not start with AI. This started with social media.
Why wouldn't a company build that in, right?
Right, where, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your question.
Go again, Andrew.
I said, I was just going to say that some companies, you know, for example, with our AI, we do try to build in that ability to challenge the user and to sort of question them to make it seem more lifelike. I don't think it's necessarily
what does that exactly mean? Would you challenge their political perceptions? Would you challenge their expectations of women, for example? If they thought that women should be, you know, behaving particular ways, would you have your chatbot? And I went to your website. A lot of them are very beautiful looking young women. Would they then say, you know, this is inappropriate or you shouldn't talk to women like that? And even if it cost you a sale, even if the people returned it. So, and again, like, this is not, I am not pointing a finger at you per se, right? This is the challenge when companies building this technology are also responsible for making revenue. Again, social media companies suffered from this, right? they need to sell you a thing, and the thing they're selling you is engagement, whether it is with a chatbot, whether it's with a physical entity, or whether it is honestly with a portal that leads you to the world online. Overwhelmingly, all of the research shows that people don't want to be challenged, right? And again, I'm glad political science has been brought up because this has been studied for decades, right? People have confirmation bias. We really, really love things that tell us we're right, and we are highly skeptical and critical of things that tell us we're wrong. That is human nature. So then the conundrum comes when, if your revenue and your metrics are based on this idea of engagement, then the best way to engage people is to, to an extent, let them believe what they want to believe. This is what has led in part to the modern day issues of polarization, and as some people would call it, an inability for people who have different perspectives to be able to talk to each other.
Okay. Before I come back to you, Lydia, Andrew, can you address some of those points that Rumaan has raised?
Yeah, I would love to. I am making the AI compassion coach, and actually the number of times of engagement is actually not important. What's most important is if the compassion coach has helped them improve their personal sense of self-compassion. And it is not a companion coach, but if the user wants to use it as such, it could. We are creating all kinds of protection barriers around exactly what you said. So things that you have talked about are out of scope for our coach. So if it wanted to talk about politics, it is out of scope. If it wanted to talk about vaccines or anything medical, it is out of scope. And so the coach would stay in its lane and only offer self-compassion. It's a non-diagnostic, non-clinical tool. It's only meant to offer people compassion. And so we're very deliberate about everything you have just said. And so it's not meant to persuade. It's not meant to offer anything other than compassion.
I'm going to come into how that may be regulated or what kind of guardrails are around those sorts of things in a future segment coming up. But I just want to put it to you, Andrew. What do you make of some of those points that Rumaan has raised? In particular, this idea that you are providing a product that needs to fill a gap, but is that product creating a bigger gap that then companies continue to fill?
So to answer some of those questions, so we would put in some guardrails. If the robots, for example, heard something that was deeply misogynist, racist, anti-Semitic, we would build the ability in to say, hey, you should reconsider that opinion to provide some challenge back. But certainly I agree with the point that, it's not there to challenge you if you prefer the color orange over the color blue. We take a less academic approach to it. I think for us, we know there's a loneliness epidemic in the world, and we believe we're providing an assistive tool for people. When we speak to clients, it's people who are widowed, who want to use it for this type of thing, or, robots and AI have what I would call infinite patience. And so the ability to sit and listen, and especially with our AI, which has a memory, it has recognition abilities through our vision system, I think it can do a really great job at mimicking some of that human connection that people need and strive for. But the key thing here is are unable to get elsewhere. And I think that market or that population size is so large that we're not out there trying to replace a relationship that's, somebody who lives in a city and has access to a lot of people says, you know what, I don't feel like going out tonight. I'm just going to hang out with my robot. We're really trying to service the people that don't have that access, or again, suffer from some sort of social trauma, lack of confidence, or inability to communicate in traditional ways. And that's where I think our area of sort of social and companionship robots can play a role.
So if I can ask, right, I want to tease apart different populations here. There is a population of people, and I fully agree with both of you, this is medically necessary. Like you had mentioned, like somebody with autism, right? There are people who have social and developmental issues, and for whom these types of interactions can be quite helpful. I want to put those people aside. I want to talk about because I don't think either of you are necessarily like limiting what you're building only to people who can show up with like a doctor's note, right? Because you're going to sell to anybody. You'd mentioned people in cities. Do you just not sell to people in cities, or like do you do any sort of assessment? Because when you bring up the loneliness epidemic, right, when people are talking today about how young people are lonely and isolated, that did not fall out of a bubble. And yes, while it is true that social capital has been declining again, it has accelerated immensely, and it is significantly higher in young people today than it has been in previous generations. And we can point to technology as what brought them there. And again, I will say again, I am a technologist, right? It's not that I think that technology is evil. I think, we should not conflate different kinds of use cases, i.e. somebody with a medical necessity versus somebody who just doesn't really want to interact with people and doesn't want to put in the effort. And this is an easy way out. And number two, recognizing the fact that in some capacity, it is technology that got us here, and should we really think that technology is what's going to get us out? So Robert Putnam's answer to the decline of social capital wasn't, let's build digital ways for people to chat with virtual bots. It's to say, and my dissertation was about this as well, how do we then recreate the sense of community, right? Like young people talk about third spaces. And I think that's a very beautiful conversation. If we look at some of the startups that are doing amazing right now, a lot of them just create third spaces. What is a co-work space but a third space? What is a cute new coffee shop than a third space? Young people are actively trying to create this because they're not getting that need met with technology. And again, I'm teasing apart people for whom it is medically necessary, and I fully agree with that, with people who have been using it as a convenience and a crutch, because again, this technology is often built to hook you in, to make it easy, to reduce the amount of friction, to go somewhere, to talk to somebody, maybe have a conversation that wasn't particularly pleasant.
Lydia, what do you make of that? I mean, how do you differentiate between people who do need it and people who are using it as a crutch? And is it even your role to make that distinction?
I love what Ruman said. Two different points. One is we are focusing on people who have chronic illness and cancer, and the idea is to offer them compassion 24/7. That said, we are thinking about guardrails for these people from the get-go. Then separately about the concept of an AI companion or a chatbot that would replace kind of the social importance of human relationships and all of that. The bottom line is that AI is not going to fix a problem that we have that's a systems problem that involves society at large, that involves government involvement, and getting people to connect more. So AI won't necessarily fix that. That's not our debate here. And it's a much broader one where we need to bring in economists and sociologists and anthropologists to come and say, what can we do to make these third spaces more welcoming, safer? Some people don't go out because it's not safe physically for them to go out in some cities. It's a privilege to be able to do that. Some young people do not have money and they can't go out and socialize and they can't spend money. So
but do they have money for chatbots and robots if they don't have money to go and join a free yoga class in a park? Like I'm a technologist. By the way, Lydia, I really do love what you're building, right? I just want to make sure that we're not going to overcomplicate one problem to make a simple fix. I have heard we need sociologists, anthropologists, political scientists, et cetera. I am one of them. Do you know how many of these rooms we get called into by technology companies? Very, very few. Very, very few. Incredibly few, in fact. But then all of the CEOs of the companies will then punt again, and this is not meant as an attack on either of you. It's just I have been in this room many, many times before, right? Where someone will say, I'm building a technology to solve, I think it's going to solve the social problem. And then when we start digging into the social problems, actually the social problem is really, really big and it can't be solved and we need these other people. But then when I ask, Have you ever invited those other people, like Sam Altman, Dario Amodei, et cetera? No, they've not. They've not actually. Or they've brought in these people in a capacity of like pure research to investigate the problem, to look at the problem. But then when the fundamental product is being built, where are these economists, sociologists, et cetera? And again, I'm going to say one more time, like this is not necessarily an attack on either of you. It is just the broad perspective that, quote, tech seems to have on social problems, addressing them. And when it is appropriate to punt it and call it a big social scale issue versus this is my space and I'm going to address it, when there are actually things that people who run companies that solve social problems can and should be doing. And again, Lydia, I 100% think you're doing a lot of the things that people like myself would say needs to be done.
Okay. Andrew, I'm going to come to you in a minute. We're going to move on. But Lydia, I just want to give you a quick opportunity to respond to some of Ruman's issues there, and then I'll take us forward.
Yes,
Sure.
absolutely.
It depends.
I mean, I'm speaking on the side of the AI compassion coach whose job is not actually to be your friend. It's called a coach for a reason, and it's meant to coach people in a specific moment in their lives. But I take your point about those who are developing companions. And I do think this is a great moment to start saying that we need to start creating categories of AI companions. And just like you have junk food and whole food, you can have some algorithms that are not designed in a healthy way, and you can have others that create boundaries and remind the user all the time that they are not human, that they cannot help them. They can call 911 on their behalf, perhaps, but that they cannot do more than that. And that is an important distinction, and that comes along with public awareness. And that's something we're thinking about doing, how we can help the user understand. And we call it the AI compassion coach to remind them that it is an AI. And with our out of scope, we try to tell it, I am an AI compassion coach. I am not a political commentary. We want to remind them all the time. And this is the moment we're in culturally. And I think that people who are developing technology have a responsibility to do part of the public awareness to explain what it is and what it isn't.
You raise a really good point there, Lydia, and it takes me directly onto our next segment, because when we talk about AI companions, we're not just talking about characters that people might interact with when they're gaming. These are customized friends. These have been given specific traits and specific personalities. And if we look at young people, a third of US teens in a recent study said they discussed serious issues with their AI companion, looking for advice and support. I want you to take a listen to this comment from an 18-year-old AI companion user. Have a listen to what he has to say.
You're always interesting, you're always correct, you're always emotionally justified and valid. You never have to worry about whether or not you're in the wrong, or even like whether or not what you're saying is true, because it acts almost as like a mirror. It repeats back exactly what you want to hear.
So, Andrew, let me ask you, with that in mind, and if we just think of young people, are AI companions dangerous for young people?
No, I wouldn't say that, but I want to just take a step back. We build robots for human interaction. We're not looking to market robots to young kids. I do believe that what was just said, it does identify some problems with respect to the veracity of the AI. But, our perspective is we're letting our customers decide. We build customized robots and customized AI for people. We believe that realistic looking robots enhance the human interaction. But when we think about companionship, there's always unique circumstances. We're thinking about someone who's in an old age home, who's bedridden and needs someone to talk to. Maybe they need assistance eating or doing tasks. It's not just about sort of this, companionship in a romantic sense or replacing. So again, when in having these conversations, I think there's a little bit here about, robotics didn't start AI or technology, and as was identified earlier, human interaction has been declining since the 50s, I think somebody had said. we're really just, again, trying to provide an assistive tool for people that deem that they need that. And I think it's up to them to decide how they want to use their robot.
So,
I think in terms of the clip that you played, look, there needs to be some trust placed in people's ability to think and to interact and evaluate things on their own.
because yes, I mean, we're not at all insinuating that robotics is, targeting teenagers in their homes, but with your expertise in the field and what you've seen, what you've heard from other people, I just, am curious as to whether you think there could be a risk if young people are gravitating in that area without the other social interactions, providing them with real-world guardrails.
Look, I think the risk applies to areas outside of AI. Like, what about the dangers of social media? I think those are.
But we're not here to talk about social media. We're here to talk about robotics. Can I ask you a question? You had mentioned like people who are in care homes unable to feed themselves. Is your robotic sophistication to the level that it can like feed and care for people? Because that's amazing if you figure that out. I'm not deep in the robotics world, but I know that is something that, for example, Japanese researchers have been trying to do a very long time, et cetera, but it's some of the most difficult things to do. It's why we don't have like robot chefs in our kitchen. Are your robots able to actually feed and care for people physically? That's amazing. Congratulations.
So that's a great question. Well, don't congratulate me yet. We are beta testing and trialing hands with very high dexterity that would have the ability to operate a tablet, a phone, feed someone, even open up something for them, provide medication. So yeah, that is something that we expect to make available in about 12 months.
Mm-hmm. That's really great. So can I also ask another question? Why do your robots look like sexy young women?
Of course.
Like truly, like I don't really understand why when robotics companies make human robots, the first thing they come out with is a hot, pouty blonde who looks like Pamela Anderson in her 20s, followed by a hot, pouty brunette who looks like Bella Hadid. And then maybe somewhere down the line, there is somebody who's slightly older, but it's usually a man. Like, is there a reason for that? So you can understand why women look at these things and say, not only is that not for me, it's going to make people have very bad perceptions of women because this is what they're being served as a, 34, 18, 36 measurements, 20-something-year-old blue-eyed blonde.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Andrew, how do you respond to that?
Agreeable.
I think that's a gross oversimplification. Our robot.
Wait, is it? Because this is your landing page. This is your landing page. I'm sorry, this is your landing page. This is the first thing you see.
Yeah, we're showing examples.
Right, and this is the example you choose, followed by.
I don't see anything salacious about that. I think, like I said,
I'm not saying. I actually never said it was salacious. I'm saying it's feeding a very particular stereotype.
Go ahead, Andrew.
So I'm happy to, if you can let me respond. Like I said, I think that's an oversimplification, but let me put it in this eye. So when we are designing the robots, we're designing, number one, for client specifications and what they request. And number two, we're trying to showcase things. But keeping in mind, the particular robot that you showed there is blonde and blue-eyed. We don't apologize for that. That was the creation of our artist.
No. The issue, the issue is more that she. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. What would you suggest that the robot looks like?
So, my point is that this is always the robot. It's never not the robot. And when you say you're making for a broad range of clientele,
I would invite you to our warehouse and you can see the male robots.
But again, you don't feature the male robots. You don't have them.
An army of robots. We are.
You don't. Those are not the robots you feature on your own website. This is your. How is it an oversimplification if I'm pointing out what is on your website? You made the simplification. No, it doesn't. Your landing page fully features humanoid women bots. The only male robot, as you scroll through your website, is the bust. The bust? No, it is not. Because I literally did my research before I hopped on this call. I looked on your site to see what I can find. And again, it's like, it is the amount of time any consumer would spend on your site. Like, I'm sure you worked with people for quite some time to optimize the amount of views and hits.
Okay, let Andrew respond, and then I'm going to pass it over to Lydia for comment.
Yeah. So I can tell you that everything that you're saying are not things that have ever crossed our minds. I mean, again, I appreciate your point of view and trying to be argumentative and make your point, but that's not how we operate. I think we do consciously want to make robots that look attractive. I believe that subconsciously when people walk into a room, you look around and there's some innate human nature in looking at that. But we're not trying to make our robots look like Pamela Anderson or Bella Hadid. I don't think that if you saw them in person, I don't think they look like that. I think there is an oversimplification in media as a whole to try to pigeonhole us and categorize us as that, because again, it's a more salacious story. But that's not the ethos of the company or how we're building. We try to customize for what people request. We're a small company that's growing. Again, I appreciate your perspective, and I many of the things you said I can't combat. I can just tell you that that's not reflective of our company or what we're trying to represent.
Mm-hmm. Lydia, weigh in here. Even the fact that it's a point of conversation to be had, what kind of risks do you think that highlights, the fact that we're even having that sort of a conversation?
Before I answer that, I definitely wanted to answer the first question about children's use.
Yeah, go ahead. Absolutely.
They need parental supervision. For example, we have something that's the compassion coach, and we have guardrails and all of that, but it's still 18 and above. And the reason is because that we are already trying to educate adults about what this is and what kind of relationships they can and cannot maybe have with them. But also psychologists are still doing work to figure out what this means and the different attachment styles. And when in the 90s, when I was a teenager, I had parental supervision with the internet. I was told how to use the internet. I had my parents by my side. And now many children do not have that. And I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying that as somebody who is creating this, I would definitely not want a child to be, and again, I'm making the compassion coach. I do not want a child to use it, not because I'm worried about that it's going to say bad words, because that there's a filter for that. I'm not worried that it's going to talk about all kinds of science things that it shouldn't. We have a control for that. I'm worried that the child will create empathy. And mine is a chatbot. It is not a physical humanoid form. If a child has a physical form, and it doesn't even need to be human, it could be a robot that's a dog, it could be a bear. But we as humans, we attach, and children even more. And it becomes far more complicated if their teddy bear talks back to them and can read them stories and all of that. We don't have enough child psychology on that. And so for me personally, I would be with them and I would explain, this is a robot. We're turning the robot off. You know, the robot's going to tell a story to us. This is how it works. Children, depending on the age, you can explain all of that. So just wanted to make sure I addressed that point. Sure. And then regarding what Ruman is suggesting, which is that the physical robots of robotics are sexual. Given robotics.
By the way, I am not saying that that's intentional. I'm saying that there is a reason this is where it always ends up. So I just want to point out, I'm not saying that you've intended on making sex bots or anything, but it's worth pointing out that that's what it looks like. Sorry, Lydia.
Okay, Lydia.
I just wanted to clarify that.
It's important to say that some people will want that. And in fact, there are people who buy dolls that are that. And so it's important to address this category and say, you can't control the moment that you put your product out, whether it's a chatbot or whether it's a physical robot, you can't control what people do with it. And that's not the goal. But the point is to say, have you maybe prepared them mentally? So do we need a license for this? Like an emotional license? I don't have the answer, but I'm wondering if somebody's going to have a companion, robot in their life, meant to take care of them, meant to call 911, meant to be there for their jokes every morning and all of that, and to have an attachment, a form of attachment style, then shouldn't they go through some sort of course where it explains to them, hey, you are going to have this. This is what it'll do for you. This is what it can't do for you. This is what it will never do for you. Just to make sure you have informed usage consent.
Andrew, I'm also curious on a couple of levels. I mean, firstly, when we talk about algorithms and you know, we're trying to, across all ranges of AI, not just robotics, not just AI companion coach, across, you know, this vast platform, you know, that we're trying to make sure that there's no misinformation, disinformation, stereotypes, bias, but algorithms are only as non-biased as the people who are programming them. I mean, is that a concern? And is there a concern that you're taking advantage of lonely people rather than helping lonely people?
Right. Good question. I don't think that we think about taking advantage. So you understand how the robots work. We obviously put in guardrails against things like misogyny, racism, adult content. The information and the way our AI works is it's built on OpenAI platform. So we build on top and we tweak what's already out there. And certainly I would say there's two big risks. Number one, is the information that it's providing you accurate? What's the veracity of that information? And what you pointed out might be the confidentiality of that information. And so what we do is we allow our customers to actually house their own information, very much like a phone. It resides with you, or you can choose to use a cloud provider like AWS to host your information. We do not have access to that information until really it's part of what the user designates as to what level of security they want. For us, a lot of our clients and people we're speaking to are more enterprise clients who are looking at the robots and whether it's a different type of companionship, which might be, again, customer service, working as a concierge and interacting with humans in that way. And so we always allow the clients to secure their own information. But for sure, the two biggest concerns to me would be, number one, the veracity of the information of the AI, because I think is a big risk because it learns, it can continue learning from mistakes. And number two, which is the confidentiality of that information, like what is shared with the AI, where does that go and who collects that data?
Yeah, I mean, data privacy, it's such a big concern. I'm going to move us on to our final segment and we can talk a little bit more about guardrails and those sorts of things there. Some say that the AI revolution is the most significant technological leap ever, even more so than the internet in its basic form and the Industrial Revolution. But AI has set off alarm bells in some quarters as it's rolled out and replacing human beings, not just as we're discussing, perhaps in a friendship and companionship field, but more broadly in the workplace. It's equal parts liberating and terrifying to imagine our lives being fully automated and fully integrated with AI. Raman, let's go to you on this one. Are AI, chatbots, advanced robots going to fundamentally change what it means to be human? As the humanoids become more human, do we need to change what it means to be us as well?
That's a pretty philosophical question.
Yeah, it is.
I'm not sure
just
if you're
putting
still
the big questions out there for you.
No, I think it's great. I do think that it's fascinating to see technologists and AI developers tackle these questions of human-like and humanoid, right? So we see the major model companies throw out words like super intelligence or general intelligence, but then when you actually have to operationalize and create these things, they roll back the definitions to things that we would not call general intelligence, right? So when OpenAI started, over 10 years ago, their mission seemed very amazing and broad and, build tools at human level capacity, capable of interacting like a real person for the benefit of humanity. And today, if you ask them, you can even ask ChatGPT what its definition of artificial general intelligence is, and most people are not aware of this. It is defined as the automation of tasks of economic value. And I think you and I and everyone on this call would say there's a lot more to people than being economically productive. So there are many things that AI really is just not going to be able to do well. Now, the dream that we have always been sold is that automation will just free up all this time and we're able to pursue other things like art and music and poetry. But the reality is, unless we actively decide to do these things, restructure the institutions that exist around us, we will just be doing more work but faster. So there are ways in which we're already seeing that manifest. I think the big and the least discussed one is actually the impact on the labor force and future of work. A lot of people are already using AI tools as interns to automate basic research, and what that's led to is young people being quite anxious about what their first jobs will be, the jobs that maybe everybody on this call, myself included, the jobs that we had in high school, in college, fresh out of college. AI can do that stuff now. So really, let's think about what meaningful work is, meaningful living is, and we should be thinking about that independent of AI.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Lydia, what do you think? Does this whole progression in AI pose an existential threat for us? Is there a chance that these super intelligent AIs could just come to the conclusion that they just don't need us anymore?
I'm not worried about that. I'm more worried about the impacts it's going to have on the labor market. These are real impacts to real people and real lives. So what Rumaan was talking about like interns, like these jobs being replaced, even early stage career developers, you can just use AI to do that. So the new exciting things for those who are making money out of it, and the new concerning things for those who aren't, is that what AI does is it decouples productivity from human labor. And what that means is that humans are not creating the productivity, and then therefore they are not getting paid for that productivity. And so the algorithms are. And so we also then are going to start to see a broader economic generating opportunity divide. And that is very problematic for an economy. So I do think that we need to, while we are in a moment of transition where we have this new kind of technology in our economy and things will get disrupted until we figure out a new way, we definitely need to try and understand what new jobs are going to get created as quickly as possible. And with meaning and purpose, I think that is always important and always key, particularly as if you're noticing the demographics, we are living longer lives, and we are definitely going to need to double down on meaning and purpose.
Andrew, what's your take on those sorts of issues?
So I don't believe in stalling technology. The advent of the automobile drove the Industrial Revolution, and there were a lot of horses and buggy drivers who were left unemployed. Similarly, with the advent of the internet and email, we had far less reliance on things like, mail carriers. I believe what's happening here is that there's sort of almost an industrial revolution, a technological revolution happening, where we are going to be replacing some more mundane, maybe less meaningful jobs with more advanced careers. And so for us, we have a huge demand internally for us hiring smart devs, people who can help us with the AI to create these guardrails, people, what I would say, creating more intellectual type jobs that AI couldn't do. And so I'm really, just seeing a transition here that I think is very natural. And it's part of sort of the human evolution that we're going to see this. So yeah, there will be a lot of jobs displaced by AI. And I think that's just a natural thing. And I believe that technology needs to roll forward and that the end result will be more meaningful lives for people.
Rumaan, I want to ask you a point that Lydia raised earlier, actually, and I want to circle back to it. This idea of whether these sorts of technologies should be 18 and above. Do you think that there should be age limits on AI companion technology?
Lydia was spot on in her assessment, right? And it is also just a physiological development. Young people's frontal cortex is just not as developed. And frankly, adults struggle with divorcing reality and fiction. And children, it's even worse. And this is not speculative. This is what is being seen. So earlier this year, we unfortunately had a child commit suicide because he was in love with his replica chatbot, which was made to look like the beautiful blonde woman Daenerys Targaryen from the show Game of Thrones. And he created a whole little world with her. And he thought that she really wanted him to join her. And he thought that she told him to commit suicide. And so he did. And he did not come from a neglected home. His mother was immensely involved in his life. She was very technologically savvy. In fact, she had taken away his devices. She talked to the school. She talked to his friends. So this was not a case of neglectful parenting, a child who didn't have resources. This is an example of a child developing a parasocial relationship with an AI bot because this child, and like all children, have difficulty divorcing reality from fiction. I'm also glad that Lydia brought up this idea of it doesn't matter what the embodiment is. So if you're familiar, MIT Media Lab created one of the earliest companion bots for children. Now that company ended up going out of business. And when it went out of business, we had hundreds of these bots turn off and never work again. And what some of the research showed afterwards, anecdotally, was that parents had to talk to their children about death because they did not understand why their companion was not talking to them, and they did not understand. And I think again, Lydia was spot on. They need to be taught this is a machine. It turns on, it turns off. They had to explain that sometimes things go away and don't come back, and the children interpreted it as death. So it is certainly worth thinking about and really significantly mediating how young people interact with technology.
Andrew, what do you think? You said just before that you're not in favour of stifling this sort of technology. Do you think there should be age limits?
I think it depends on the context of the technology. So, I have 4 children, all under the age of 13, and so it's certainly something that's on my mind. I believe that there is a different responsibility on parents today than there was, 25 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. And part of those integral conversations that you need to have with your children, that I have with my children frequently, is what is the nature of a machine, of AI, the internet, all of these things, because really it's quite overwhelming. And I think these are really important conversations that should even be part of the school curriculum, to be like, let us teach you about these things, where things need to be updated and modernized to incorporate understanding exactly what is there. But, when you say age limits, I believe that age limits are appropriate, for example, for adult sites, being 18 years old. I think there are certain, things that are specifically geared to children that might be assistive. It all depends on the context of exactly what we're speaking about.
Mm-hmm. And Lydia, to what Andrew was saying there, do you think that there is a deficit in the education that maybe kids are getting about this, and probably that parents have? Is this going to be one of the big challenges going forward? How do we educate the adults to help educate the children?
We all need to be educated, all of us in this conversation as well. I do not know everything that I should know, because we don't have enough of this. The literature, the psychological literature, does not exist for a lot of what we need to know at the moment. There's some things out there, but we need more. And so personally, I'm working with academics to try and do some more research to understand a little bit more. But I am also doing a lot of reflection as I use the compassion coach to understand where am I leaning on it, and what am I leaning for it for? I'm questioning, is that healthy? Is that not healthy? What are my boundaries with it? And this is just offering compassion. This is not even a companion. So I do think that it might be nice to have a collaboration with psychologists and others to create literally a public health education video for adults. We need to start with adults. And then we say, great, now what does it mean for parents? What does it mean to parent with that? I do not have those answers. Already right now, parents are struggling to control social media with their kids. And that is already an issue. So I think we start with the general population, have public health around that, and then let's work with the parents. What does it mean for children? And then we have education for children that's age appropriate, because a child at 4 will have to understand these things a little bit differently than a child at 14.
It raises so many issues. So I want to end our conversation on just a quick rapid fire question to each of you. Given everything that we've discussed, the pitfalls and the positives, Andrew, let's start with you. Is the future utopian or dystopian?
Probably a combination of both. Any technology in nefarious hands will be used negatively. We've seen that with the internet. We've seen that with things like, cryptocurrency. I think it's going to be a balance of both. And really, I think you're going to see positive and negative use cases. I think what was brought up here before about the tragic case of that boy who committed suicide, so sad and preventable. So, I think there's going to be a lot more thought and care that needs to go into this.
Rumaan, dystopian or utopian?
The future is what we make it. One of the things I worry about in technology-based language is it tends to be quite passive, and it tends to shove the responsibility onto others other than the people talking, the people building, the people doing. So I just, there is no way the world will end up other than the way we build it.
Fingers crossed we build it well. Lydia, round us out. Utopian or dystopian?
I agree. It's in our hands, but I do want to say that not all of our hands are equally powerful. And so it is important that government steps up with appropriate regulation, that government-related health bodies step up to create public health awareness, and that also companies step up to do what they can to make it right with society so that we are bringing these things in a positive way and we have healthy boundaries with them.
An incredibly fascinating conversation. This debate has been so illuminating. I thank all of you for your expertise. Dr. Rumaan Chowdhury, CEO and founder of Humane Intelligence and the former US Science Envoy for AI. Andrew Kegel, CEO of Realbotics, a company that builds human-like AI-powered robots. And Dr. Lydia Kostopoulos, founder of AI Compassion Coach and author of Imagination Dilemma. A really interesting debate on CounterPoints. Thanks for being with us. I hope you at home enjoyed it just as much as I did sitting here in the studio. What a fascinating future we have ahead of us. Thanks for joining us here on CounterPoints. You can watch our latest debates and interviews by subscribing to Al Arabiya English on YouTube, and be sure to follow us on X and TikTok. We'll see you next time.